session with Hannah Hyatt. She's going to give us a wonderful presentation. We might just give you that minute again, make sure everyone's filing in okay. I will just open my box so I can roughly keep an eye on who's coming in. Great, we've got a few of you slowly coming in. Tap a hi or give me a wave if you like. It feels pretty lonely at my end here. I can't see anybody. It's quite an isolating experience emceeing an online conference. Are you all sitting comfortably? We have another cracking presentation for you. I'm just going to give it another half a minute or so. Okay, everyone, just to make sure we got a lovely big audience for Hannah. Oh, look, I see little hellos. Donna's always the first with the hellos. Thanks, Donna. You're so keen. If anyone else wants to say hi, you can do it. Not just me, to anyone. You can do that at any point. I think we're going to get going in about 10 seconds or so. I think there's a fair few making their way in. It's nice always to give a minute or so, get people in. I think that was a bit of a glitch yesterday because we were just so focused on time. All right, so how are you feeling, Hannah? Give me a little nod. Yes, she's good. I think Hannah's ready to go, everyone. So I'm going to do a little intro for Hannah Hyatt. Hannah Hyatt is one of our Finding North network members. Hannah has had a wealth, a long-running lived experience of mental distress and those lived and living experiences that we're talking a lot about these couple of days. Hannah is a national mental health advocate and a public speaker, and Hannah's done campaigns, media campaigns for SANE, Headspace, and you were on the ABC program some time ago, Hannah, the You Can't Ask That, a series which has been talked about a great deal. So congratulations for appearing on that. And your aim is to contribute as much as possible in terms of advocacy and championing lived experience, and you're very passionate, Hannah, about stigma reduction, well, we would all be passionate about that, but you have actually had a great voice in some campaigns, and you've got some real insights and some a great presentation to share with us today. So I'm going to turn myself off, turn my camera and mic off, and let you get going, Hannah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. So my name's Hannah. And thanks for coming to listen to me talk today. So I guess what I'm going to be talking about is directly related to who I am and what I've experienced throughout my life. So I'm a sister, a friend, a partner, and a student. I'm definitely not a confident public speaker, so which is maybe a bit surprising considering what I'm doing right now. Yeah, there's many aspects to my sense of self, and in a lot of ways, I'm a pretty regular 29-year-old. And I'm also someone who has had and continues to have significant and complex mental health challenges, and including periods of hospitalization, suicidal ideation, and attempts. I have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder and schizophrenia. I'm a mental health advocate, and I have been for quite a few years now. And I've had various voluntary and paid roles at national mental health organisations such as Headspace, Reach Out, and SANE, including advocacy, leadership, and peer support roles. So it wasn't that long ago that publicly sharing my story of living with mental illness would not have been possible. I couldn't even go outside by myself at one point. I was so tormented by psychosis and depression and so terrified of the world. The psychosis felt like 10 million eyes watching me at all times, waiting to strike. The depression was crippling to the point of complete and utter desperation. And there were many times when suicide felt like the only option. But I'm still here. And not only am I here, but I'm growing in my recovery every day. And I've been able to do things that I didn't think would ever be possible. So I'm going to share some of my story with you and explain how I found my strengths amongst the often seemingly unbreakable affliction that is complex mental illness. So I've lived with depression and generalized anxiety disorder throughout my childhood and teenage years. And I experienced a bit of a shift in my symptoms towards the end of my time at high school and the beginning of university. The depression and anxiety became even more debilitating than before, and I could barely function on a day-to-day basis, let alone study or socialize. The anxiety transformed into a state of paranoia and terrifying psychosis. And for anyone who doesn't know what psychosis is, it includes 4 types of symptoms. So delusions, which are false beliefs that can't be changed by evidence; hallucinations, such as hearing voices or otherwise sensing things that aren't really there; disordered thinking, which includes muddled, disrupted thoughts and speech; and disordered behavior, such as unusual, inappropriate, or extreme actions. So obviously these symptoms had a huge impact on my life, and I was out of touch with reality. I thought that I was being followed and watched all the time, and that a camera had been planted in my room and people were watching me through it. And that sounds kind of silly now, but at the time it was all too real, like a never-ending nightmare, except I was awake and I couldn't escape it. A new diagnosis followed this, and I remember sitting across from my psychiatrist at the time in a cold, sterile clinical room, just like I had so many times before. But this time was different because he said, "We think you have schizophrenia." And just like that, any ounce of hope I ever had of getting better was crushed. I knew that depression and anxiety were illnesses that people could recover from. But like most people, I didn't know much about psychosis or schizophrenia, and had only heard of the deeply harmful and false portrayals in movies and the media. The typical psycho and crazy stereotypes. In my mind, that was who I was, and it devastated me. So at 18 years old, when I should have been enjoying my newfound adulthood, I completely isolated myself. I was physically punishing myself because that's what I thought that I deserved. That's what the internal and external stigma, as well as the thoughts and feelings that come along with schizophrenia, did to me. And I was in a constant state of terror, terrified of the voices and the demons I was seeing around me, terrified of myself, and terrified of what that diagnosis of schizophrenia meant for me. I remember thinking at the time that this is it, my life is over, and there's nothing I can do to avoid it. And sadly, the attitudes of some of the people around me didn't help very much either. Even some of the professionals that I went to for help had incredibly low expectations for my future. If I had to describe my experience with schizophrenia in one word, it would be powerless. I believed that I would never fulfill my potential, and in fact, I didn't really have a potential at all. And even that my real self no longer existed, and I wasn't a real human, just a shell. It was an incredibly dark time. In the earlier years of my experience of mental distress, the subsequent diagnosis and treatments, I struggled to make sense of my experiences and develop a positive sense of self. Even now, I still struggle with it. I'm immensely challenged by trying to regain a positive identity of my own choosing. I had to search tirelessly to find my place in the world. I found a lack of positive messaging to inspire me and give me any hope for my future. And what would have been helpful is the kind of hope and inspiration that comes from hearing other people's stories and from a more progressive views of what my experience is or might be. I always found plenty of information about how disordered I was, what symptoms I might experience, the theories behind it, the dominant research, and what medications are thought to help, but no real sound and conclusive explanation of what exactly schizophrenia is. And I now know the reason for this, and it's because a conclusive scientific explanation doesn't really exist. So therefore, I wasn't able to discover what successful treatment would be for my personal struggles for a long time. I was forced to simply accept certain things in my treatment, and most of those things were, I guess, measured against drug-centered approaches. So these things that I was expected to accept were essentially just guessing games and trial and error towards my distressing experiences. And if I ever challenged or questioned this, I was labeled as non-compliant. The guessing, judgment, treating, analyzing, the assumptions towards my challenges with my mental health, and the approach of over-medicating me were adopted by those in white coats or people with clinical degrees. So I trusted and finally went along with their approach. I had no real control or say in my treatment or what was happening to me. And this was deeply problematic, and I didn't fully recognize this until later on. Typical mental health care and models of recovery and its definition of a meaningful life was also problematic for me. I experienced it to be deficits focused, and although I found mentions of the possibility that I could one day lead a meaningful life, this wasn't based on my definition of a meaningful life. I was told to aim for living in supported housing and maybe working at a shop or something like that. And there's nothing wrong with those things, but I wanted more. The system wasn't offering the kind of help that I wanted and needed. Mental health services and society at large weren't able to see, listen to, or understand what I needed. Once I searched outside those approaches, I started upon a journey of incredible discovery. I learned about myself, my world, and my potential. I entered the working world to forge a career in mental health, and I re-entered higher education and have since earned qualifications in mental health and human services. I started working towards my dreams and ambitions for life. Although I had lost sight of them for a long time, I'd always had dreams and ambitions inside me. No one in any of my medical teams had ever asked me what it was that I wanted to achieve. And I think it's pretty incredible that in all those years of accessing services, those who claim to practice person-centered care that were supposedly helping me achieve recovery didn't ask me once what that would look like for me. I was told to make sure that I don't forget to pick up a hobby, because that's the level of purpose in life that the system thinks is most meaningful for people like me. It is very meaningful for some, not for others. And it shouldn't be a blanket approach. I wanted more, and I deserved more from life. And what I wanted was to help other people like me. So my first steps towards this and my personal recovery is probably a little bit unconventional. As you can probably tell, I didn't have the best experiences when seeking help. from some professionals. I actually see my first step as volunteering at Headspace. And going to my interview for that position, that was the first time I'd walked down the street alone in a very, very long time. And as soon as I went into the interview, I started crying because I was overwhelmed at the whole situation. But I guess they saw something in me. And I'll forever be grateful for that. I ended up volunteering at my local Headspace for 3 years and also worked on the National Headspace Youth Advisory Group. I'm now a passionate mental health advocate, lived experience representative, and peer worker. I'm a SANE peer ambassador and have shared my mental health story in their National Schizophrenia Awareness campaign a few years ago, and also on You Can't Ask That on the ABC. And I've also been lucky enough to be nominated for and win some awards for my advocacy work. And I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Human Services. I'm aware that I only have a little bit of time left, so I'm going to try and be quick. So getting myself to this place definitely hasn't been easy. I have good days and bad days, good months and bad months, but it's been 100% worth it. My recovery from the darkness of mental illness has taken a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and I've definitely worked for it. So I also try and take care of myself as best as possible, and that's been an essential part of my recovery. But what's equally as essential and what stands out a lot for me are the many people who have helped me along the way. The friends, colleagues, and fellow advocates who have encouraged me to view my lived experience with complex mental illness and recovery as a strength that can be drawn on to help others, and also to bring about mental health system reform, not a weakness or something that I should be ashamed of. That support and love has been the catalyst I needed in order to take the necessary steps towards recovery and save myself. And I want to emphasize that it didn't take just one person to save me from schizophrenia. It took a whole community. And although the parts of me that were hurt the most took control for a long time, my inner spark never went out, and I just needed some help to find it again. I'm going to skip a little bit. A couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and this actually helped me with my sense of self a lot, because it helped me to view my mental health struggles as an understandable result of trauma and abuse that I experienced growing up, instead of the result of something being inherently wrong with me. I'm happy to say that I've found a great psychiatrist who actually listens to me, and I also received support through the NDIS, which I'm incredibly grateful for, because I know how hard it is to get NDIS support, especially for psychosocial disability. And it would be insincere to say that I don't currently struggle anymore or have any hard times. But I know that I'll always be able to overcome any of the challenges I face, and that I deserve happiness. So against all odds and all the stigma, I found my passion, and that's advocating for and supporting people like me. I have turned my greatest obstacle and vulnerability into a strength, a source of purpose, and a career. What I hope is that my story has let anyone listening who lives with complex mental illness, or who has a loved one living with complex mental illness, know that there is always hope, no matter how dark it is. And with the appropriate support, recovery is possible. And it is certainly possible to live a life of passion, meaning, and purpose while living with a severe mental health condition. Thank you.
Oh, Hannah, thank you so much. You shared so beautifully, and you can see the flood of hearts and applauses coming across the screen. I think someone earlier was sharing a little party popper emoji, so that has gone down really well. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts for coming and giving us all these insights to your views and your experiences. That was a fantastic presentation and really well articulated, so well done. Yeah, everyone, more hearts and claps. I'm going to just close us off this session with just a reminder to anyone who feels any challenges or any discomfort, if anything is brought up for you, because we're hearing lots of parts of people's stories, use those support numbers, use your self-care. There'll be lots of those coming into the chat, so everybody take care of yourselves. But I think that mostly what a lot of people, from what I can see my end, are just finding you a wonderful inspiration, Hannah. So thank you again. Thank you from all of us.